Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Now, if you're like me, you're not going to really know too much about Larnaca ahead of the game on Thursday night. So I've drafted in Stel from This Is Mappa podcast to get the lowdown on Larnaca. Stel, how are you doing?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Right, come on then. How's their season going? Or how's their season gone, rather?
Right. Okay, so where do I begin with this one? Because with Cyprus, it is a very topsy-turvy league. Now, unlike the Premier League, with the Cypriot League, they played the first 26 games and the league splits. So you got the top 6 and then the bottom 8. They have their own groups and the top 6 play each other twice. And those points accumulate that added on to their total from the 26 games. Now, today's the final day for certain teams to finish their season. AEK have finished their season. They're second at the moment because Upworld won last night. So they are still in with a chance of winning the title because they need to play within the playoffs. Now, with AEK, they're a fairly new team in comparison to most teams in Cyprus. They were founded in 1994. What happened was there were 2 teams in Larnaca. They amalgamated and they made one. So effectively, Larnaca are known as the only team in Larnaca, although there are 2 other teams in Larnaca, but they're known as refugee clubs. They came from the north after 1974. So AEK are practically a new team, really. They don't have strong foreign investment like a lot of clubs do in Cyprus, but they have a Spanish influence. They've got a head coach called Luis Oltra, who took charge at the beginning of the season. But prior to that, they brought in Xavi Roca as technical director. He was at Barcelona. And he came in and he completely revamped the squad. I mean, they've had, how many coaches? They've had 1, 2, 3. They've had 6 coaches since 2020. But for Cyprus, that's normal because one team is in their 6th head coach this season already. So, yeah.
a lot of Watford-like clubs over there then.
Yeah, exactly. But last season, they started off with a fella called David Cadala, who used to play for the club, a Spanish defender. And he did pretty well. We brought in the likes of Matt Derbyshire, who played for Blackburn Rovers. We brought in a fellow called Thiago Santos that won the championship with Omonia the previous season. And he was building a squad, and they did pretty well at the beginning of the season. But come to the last 3 or 4 games, they kind of slid off the pace. And in Cyprus, people are very, very critical, very impatient. One thing led to another. He was sacked with 7 games left of the playoffs to go. So they were in with a chance of winning the title, and then it just slipped off. They sacked their manager, brought in David Badia. And to be honest, David Badia did a really good job. He got them from 4th place to 2nd. Last season, there were 2 teams qualifying for the Champions League in Cyprus, and he got them to the 2nd place, which was a remarkable achievement for the club because, all right, they've won 2 Cypriot Cups, but they've never really won the title. They've never challenged for titles. In fact, their biggest match was in 97, I think it was, when they played Barcelona in a Cup Winners' Cup game. So you could tell that this is a club that, while there's a lot of potential, they haven't fulfilled it because of the level in Cyprus. Apoel have been dominating. Anorthosis have won a title. Isle have won a title. Apollon or Omonia, they won titles. But AEK are like the needleman. But then again, 1994... it's kind of like MK Dons, really, isn't it? You're kind of expecting, them to kind of, progress into the higher leagues, but they haven't done it for whatever reason. But AEK are kind of like that. So right now, they're in with a chance of a title. They've had a long season. So, yeah, I could go on all day about AEK in all fairness in terms of their history. It's an interesting one, but, yeah, I won't bore people too much.
Do you know how they've just finished 2nd in the league before it splits in 2? Is that what was expected of them this season, or they have exceeded expectations?
It's difficult to say because while they finished 2nd last season, that was a big surprise. They have invested well in the summer, but as have the rest. Apoel, who have won the most Cypriot titles, they went through a bit of a sticky patch. They had Mick McCarthy for a few months and they sacked him a couple of years ago. But they invested heavily in the summer. They changed their coaches after the 3rd or 4th game, and they went on a ridiculous winning streak, 15, 16 games unbeaten as well. In January, we brought in Federico Makeda on loan, who was at Man United, and he scored a goal the other night. Omonia, my team, they were expected to challenge, but we've had problems. Neil Lennon was sacked 7 games into the season. We changed our head coach. He was sacked 2 months later. We've got another coach now. Unorthosis, Jason Punchin is there. They were expected to be in with a shout. They're not even in the top 6. They can't finish in the top 6, knocked out of the cup. They've had problems. On and off the field, which I'm not going to go into because it will scare you off Cyprus, to be honest. Then you have Aris and Bafo. Now, Aris are the smallest team in Limassol. They're kind of like, well, if I put it in London perspective, you've got Arsenal, Tottenham, West Ham, Chelsea. They're kind of like, I wouldn't even say the Crystal Palace. They're like a smaller team. They don't have many fans, but they've got a Ukrainian backing them. And they've got a lot of money. They brought in Kokorin on loan from a club in called Fiorentina. They've got a lot of players where they can basically throw money at things. Same with Buffer. Buffer are a club that, similarly to AEK, they were two clubs and made into one, but they were bought out by a guy called Roman Dubov, who has a billionaire Russian backer. They've redone the training facility. They've got Henning Berg as head coach. Mendieta is on the board. Salgado is on the board. So, and that area in Buffer, they've really done well to regenerate the area. They've got golf courses. I think Abramovich has got golf courses there. So, in terms of AEK and their progression, I think they've done very well given the circumstances, given that other clubs have improved. Then again, they've got stability. And in Cyprus, you need stability, because if you don't have it, you're going to fail. And they've had that all season. They've stuck with Oltra, who has done a remarkable job getting them where they are right now, especially challenging for titles. Mix that with European competition. I think that they've done well. I think they've done well given the circumstances, yes.
I am loving this. 6 minutes of just knowledge intertwined with passion so far. I never knew all these, I would call it household names, but familiar names with the English Premier League fan. Have been involved in Cypriot football. This is fantastic. I've never watched Cypriot football. I'm not going to pretend I have, but I don't mind a bit of the Australian football because of the kickoff times, with it being early morning in the UK. And quite often you'll put that on and you'll see like former Premier League players running around. That minute, Carl Jenkinson's playing out there and stuff like that. And there's always players that you think, wow, since when's he gone out there? Daniel Sturridge and stuff. But it's a bit like that listed to you. Just rattle off some names. You're like, bloody hell, okay, fair enough. Let's look at the European campaign then. They finished third in their group behind Fenerbahce and Rennes, and they just beat Dnipro in the playoffs of the Conference League. Am I right in saying they're only the second Cypriot team to make it this far in a European competition?
As far as I'm Upwell made the last 8 of the Champions League many years ago. And Anorthosis, where did Anorthosis come? I can't remember. I think they only got to the group stage. Anorthosis, they never got to the knockouts. Yeah, so they are. Yeah, actually, yeah.
How did they get on in the Europa League? I mean, I know they finished third in the league, but did it look okay? Did they compete well? Is this considered a good thing?
In all fairness, it's an amazing thing for Cyprus. It's amazing because while you do have the rivalries, like my team, Omonia, we don't like Upwell. And to see them do well in the league in Europe, it hurts us. And we don't want them to do well. But a lot of Cypriots are like, well, it's good for the coefficient. It's good for the points because it gives us the opportunity to get an extra spot or maybe navigate through the group stages or the qualification phases in a better way, in a more favourable way in that respect. AEK, they finished second last season, so they were able to qualify for the Champions League, which was the first time we had 2 Champions League spots. Apollon won the league. They were also in the Conference League or the Europa League, one of the two, because Apollon have had a bad season as well. They've had 4 head coaches, 4 or 5 this season. And they were the champions. But anyway, so AEK started off in the Champions League qualifiers. They lost to Midtjylland on penalties. They then slipped into the Europa League qualifiers where they beat Dnipro and then Partizan Belgrade. They got into the group, which, as you mentioned, they had Rennes, Dinamo Kiev, and Fenerbahce, and they finished third in the group. And for us, it's like, that's great. Okay, they didn't qualify out of the Europa League group, but they're still in Europe. And we still got a team there, which is great for us. And as you said, they beat Dnipro. I think they've done very well given the circumstances. I think, a lot of people call leagues like Cyprus and Malta, they'll call them farmers' leagues, which I think is highly disrespectful, especially when it comes to the type of players that are playing in Cyprus at the moment. You look at AEK squad, they've got Mikel Gonzalez, who was at Sociedad when David Moyes was there. In fact, I think he spent 13 years at Zaragoza. Angel Garcia, he was at Real Madrid's academy. Rosales was at Malaga and Twente. Grushko was at Hajduk Split, I think. Triskovsky, North Macedonian captain. He's 35 years old, but he's played at a very high level. And then you could talk about Pere Bons from Alaves. You got who else? Sanjurjo came from Osasuna. So these players have played in La Liga. Some of them have played in Serie A. So for them to come to Cyprus, you could argue it's a tail end of their career. But because the league is improving and because Cyprus is great for the weather. It's good for, how shall I put it, evading tax a little bit. So it is a great place to go. And, the educational system is getting better. We've got a lot of American academies out there, British academies. We've got expats living out there. So it is a very multicultural island. And as I mentioned before, the weather helps them out. So it is a lovely place for them to go. But for people to call these players farmers or whatever, I think it's highly disrespectful. My team, Omonia, we played Man United, the big bad Man United, and they just about beat us 3-2 at our place and 1-0 at their place. We've got internationals in our squad. And I think we put Cyprus a little bit on the map, a little bit with that performance. But yeah, that's it. That's a long answer to your question.
Love it, though. I absolutely love it. Right, let's turn our attention to Larnaca on the pitch then. What's their strengths and weaknesses, would you say?
Well, their strengths are from out wide. They've got marauding fullbacks. They've got two very tricky wingers. I mentioned one of them in Grushko, who may not play because he's been injured. But they have brought in a winger called Yacolis from Angers in France, and he seems to be doing well. But their main guy for me is Faraj, the right winger. He's very similar to Riyad Mahrez in the way that he plays. He's very tricky. He likes to cut inside with his left foot. He can use his right foot. He's caused all sorts of problems this season. He scored a cracking goal against Partizan Belgrade, which I'm sure you can see on YouTube. Very, very good player. I think he's 24, 25, got a lot of ability. But what they love to do effectively is get the ball out wide, whip it into the box, and they overload the box. They usually have 4 or 5 players in there. Now, if you're not good at defending set pieces or crosses, they give you problems left, right, and centre. I think the majority of their goals have come from wide areas, either deliveries from the wingers or the fullbacks. Now, in turn, their weakness is because they commit so many men in the box, they get caught in the counter-attack. And it's happened to them numerous times this season. In fact, the last game that they played, not at home, but the away game at Apollon, they had to win to stay top. And because they were overcommitting men forward, they conceded a goal in injury time on the counter-attack. So my main concern for them is, number one, obviously committing too many men forward, but I don't think they'll do that against West Ham. I really don't. I think they'll be very conservative in their approach. But my other concern is the stamina and the energy levels. Now, while I mentioned these guys have played top-level football, they're at the tail end of their careers, a lot of these players. And you talk about West Ham, who are a Premier League club, who train at elite level. They've got the best sports physios. They've got the best sports science. And they're not going to bring in players who are lazy, So players that are high intensity, high energy. So I think that's probably where West Ham will get AEK. Maybe the first hour, 70 minutes, it'll be a pretty even game, I think, anyway. But from 70 minutes onwards, I think you're going to see the legs, you're going to see the jelly legs,
Yeah, I get that. Right, you've started briefly mentioning West Ham. What's your thoughts on West Ham?
They're a bit topsy-turvy, aren't they? Look, when I was growing up, I remember Ludek Mikloshko and Alvin Martin, Tony Cottee. And I remember West Ham as being kind of like a yo-yo club, going from Division 1 to the Premier League, or should I say Division 1 to Division 2, because obviously the Premier League brought in 92, 93. But yeah, they've always had a rich history. You can talk about the players that have played winning the World Cup. You can talk about players like Frank McAvenny. You can talk about, obviously, the conveyor belt youth system, where you've seen Rio Ferdinand and Joe Cole and all these players. You could talk about Paolo Di Canio. So in terms of the club's history, everyone knows about West Ham. But this season, it's been a bit of a strange one for me, because last season was great with David Moyes, when you had, Jesse Lingard coming in. You had a fantastic back end of the season. Antonio was firing all cylinders. And this season, I look at them thinking, they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know what you're going to get from them. And I guess it's happened quite a lot with West Ham over the years. I remember it happening with Redknapp. I think it happened with Pellegrini as well, if I'm not mistaken. You went through a phase where you were challenging for Europe, and then the following season, it just slipped down. So I don't know. But I think right now is the best time for AEK to get West Ham, because obviously you guys lost at the weekend. It was a heavy defeat. Confidence isn't great. I'm guessing David Moyes will make changes. And if he does make changes, for his sake, I hope he doesn't play some younger players, because I think he'll be taking AEK for mugs by doing that. But I don't think he will. I think he will respect them. I think he knows the European game, having spent time in Spain. and he knows that you can't take these clubs for granted. So, yeah, it will be an interesting one from a neutral's perspective anyway. So, yeah.
Any players you admire from the current West Ham setup?
Sorry?
Any players you admire from West Ham's team?
I like the Brazilian lad that you brought in, Paqueta. I think he's a good player. The Johnson, the defender, he's Paul Parker's nephew, isn't he? Yeah, I know Paul. He told me that. I just had to say that.
Just name dropping that in there.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. There you go. Look, I like Antonio. I like Mikel Antonio, but again, he's another one where he's hot and cold. Danny Ings, I think, will be a great signing for you guys. I think he's very underrated. He was very unlucky at Aston Villa, and at Burnley and at Liverpool. Obviously, he's been an unlucky player. Really, he gets injuries and whatnot, but he can get you goals. Declan Rice is obviously a big name. We know how highly valued he is. But I think Paqueta stands up a lot. Oh, and Benrahma, what a player he is. Honestly, he's fantastic.
How do you see Thursday night going then?
I'm thinking it's going to be a draw. Probably because it's going to be at the AEK Arena. When the draw was made, I thought they were going to move the game to the Razidi, which is the national stadium, which holds more. But the AEK Arena is UEFA standard. It only holds at 8,000, but the fans are right on top of the players, mate. And it can be a bit of a provocative atmosphere. As I said, Cypriot fans, they love football, but we've had problems with crowd violence, especially this season. We've had, where do I begin? We've had one game cancelled 20 minutes before kickoff because the stadium's been set on fire. We've had one game cancelled, called off 2-3 minutes from the end because a fan threw a Molotov cocktail on the pitch. We've had game delays because while the players have been walking on the pitch, a firework has been set off and just about missed the players. We've had fans getting onto the actual pitch and fighting between each other. It's been a mess. It's been a mess. But this is probably because rules have been relaxed in Cyprus. Now, in the UK, you could just buy your ticket and go to a game, right? In Cyprus, you need what they call a gata filaku, which is a fan card. So it's an ID card. So when you show up to the game, you need to show your ID card and your match day ticket. Now, a lot of the ultras don't like this because it's their identity, so they haven't been showing up to games. But more and more, these laws have been relaxed, so to speak, and the clubs have been more relaxed about it. So the ultras are now coming back, which is great because you've got a great atmosphere. But at the same time, you're going to have problems fighting. You know, two clubs, Isle and Apollon, they hate each other. They're the clubs in Limassol. They've been sharing the same stadium for 40, 50 odd years with Cypriot. And the council decided, we're going to spend money on building a new stadium. Brand new stadium, lovely, beautiful. Great, no problem. The first game between those two teams at the new stadium was a cup game. And it ended up two sets of fans fighting at half-time, pulling out seats, throwing them at each other. They just can't stand each other. So the clubs need to take some responsibility. In fact, the clubs need to take a lot of responsibility. But for them, in their mind, and this is, again, back to an issue with the Cypriot Football Association, the clubs would rather take a 4 or 5 grand fine, because that's how much roughly they get for these things, rather than forking out 10, 15 grand on extra security. So
it's cheaper. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
They're not daft over there. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely love that. Right then, final question. Can I get a score prediction from you, please, Stel?
I said 1-1 yesterday. I'm sticking to 1-1.
Good, man. Well, listen, thank you very much for joining me. I massively appreciate it. And hopefully we can catch up next week after the first leg, ahead of the second leg as well, and get your thoughts on the game that's just passed and the deciding leg, hopefully. But thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. And I'm not going to lie, thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. But you guys at home have enjoyed it. Please do drop a like on the video by clicking thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new to Hammers Chat, and do check out This Is Mappa Podcast. The link is in the description below as well. Go check them guys out and hear what they've got to say ahead of the West Ham game too. And we'll catch you in a bit.